Hey guys, this is Benny Ricciardi with rotocurve.com, and I'm here with today's section of Benny's Bats for today, Sunday, August 23rd. I'm back from my vacation and ready to get back into it. So what we like to do here with the Benny's Bats section, we try to go through every pitcher that's on the mound today, figure out what their weakness is, and then figure out which bat's profile to do the best against them on the other team. We got a full slate of games here for Sunday, so let's get right into it. The first guy I want to talk about is Matt Boyd, left-handed pitcher for Detroit. He's going up against Texas today. Boyd has allowed right-handed bats to hit 286 against him with a whip of 1.49 in his limited innings in the majors. Nobody on that Texas team really profiles well against left-handed pitching. They have a lot of left-handed they have a lot of left-handed bats on that team, and the right-handed bats that they haven't been hitting well lately. You can look at a guy like Adrian Beltre, who actually had a good game yesterday against another lefty. He's the best bat that they have from the right side, but he hasn't been having a great season so far. So it's nice to see that he's starting to get a couple hits. I think he picked up 3 of them yesterday, so he's starting to play a little better, might be a guy who's in play. The other guy you can look at is their leadoff batter, Delino DeShields Jr. Those are the 2 guys who I think have the best chance to do some damage here against Boyd. Next guy we can talk about is Adam Conley from the Miami Marlins. He's a left-hander. Limited innings pitched, right-handed bats have hit 317 against him, and his ERA against right-handers is 6.75. Let's see, a couple guys on that Phillies team that I would like to use. The one guy who makes the most sense to me is Andres Blanco. Blanco is second base, third base, or shortstop eligible, depending on what site you're playing on. He has a 455 WOBA so far with a 244 ISO score. He's been picking up a couple hits every game, double-digit scores over on DraftKings, basically daily at this point. And for a price of $2,100 on DraftKings, he's definitely a salary saver that you're going to want to know about today. If you're looking to play a guy like Clayton Kershaw today, you're going to need some of these cheap options to put in your lineup, and I think he's probably one of the best ones that you can get today. You could also look at guys like Darren Ruff. Ruff has a 443 WOBA and a 188 ISO against left-handed pitching too. Again, he's a right-handed bat that hits left-handed pitching very well. He has his entire career. Even though he's a platoon guy, he has the right splits here today, so he's somebody else that I think you can look at. Again, just remember, this game's in Miami, which isn't a great hitter's park, so I wouldn't look to target these bats very heavily, but Connolly is one of the weaker pitchers on the mound today. The last guy you can take a look at is the catcher, Cameron Rupp. Basically, they have 2 catchers. Carlos Ruiz caught yesterday, so I'm pretty sure Rupp's going to be in the lineup today. Rupp is the younger of the 2, and they're basically about the same to me. Both guys hit left-handed pitching pretty well, but the reason why I think Rupp is going to be in there is they're trying to see what they have with this kid. He's, like I said, he's a lot younger than Ruiz. Ruiz is not going to be the future for this franchise, so they're trying to see if Cameron Rupp might be, and he's got a 428 WOBA with a 289 ISO against left-handed pitching, so he's somebody else that could be in play. He does bat lower in the order, but you are able to get him cheap. I think he's close to min price over on Fantasy Feud. Feud, I don't think, has a qualifier today that's going on, but they still have a few seats left for their big $500,000 championship. And they just announced a $1 million championship for NFL football. So if you haven't given this site a try yet, they're up and coming and very quickly closing in on the fantasy aces and the victims of the world for the number 3 overall spot. By the end of football season, they may even be there behind DraftKings and FanDuel. So if you haven't signed up yet, make sure you get over there. Use the promo code CURVE. You'll get a 100% deposit bonus on any deposit up to $500. And you'll also get a free $25 from the Curve community to try out the site and see if you like it. Remember, you can come over to the forums and give us your opinion on it. The guys from Fantasy Feud are over in the forums, as well as all the guys from RotoCurve. So if you have any questions, we'll be able to answer them for you. And, they're very good about staying on top of things and, talking to the people. So if you have any questions, feel free to come over and leave them in the forum. Hopefully they'll get answered pretty quickly for you. Next guy we're going to talk about is David Hale. David Hale is a right-handed pitcher for the Colorado Rockies. He has a 300 batting average to both sides of the plate this year, and he's given up 12 home runs already in 53 innings. Now remember, this game is in Coors Field as well, and the New York Mets have about 30 runs in the last 2 days in Coors Field. So if you don't have any Mets in your lineups and you haven't been playing them, there's a good chance that you haven't been cashing over the last couple days. The guys who stand out the most to me, they're all expensive today. It doesn't matter what site you're playing on. The price is always jacked up in Coors Field, and it's very expensive to put a lot of these Mets in your lineup. Let's see. Curtis Granderson is probably my favorite option today. 391 WOBA for him, 242 ISO number. He had a couple hits yesterday. He was in that 2-hole. Should be back in the leadoff spot today against the right-handed pitcher as a left-handed bat. I think he's another guy that you got to look at. Lucas Duda, another left-handed bat, 343 WOBA, 220 ISO score. Again, he had a day off yesterday, but against the right-hander, he should be back in there. You could even look at guys like Daniel Murphy, a guy like Yoenis Cespedes right now, 395 WOBA, 259 ISO score, righty-on-righty matchups. He's been killing the ball since coming over to the Mets. Juan Uribe had a big game yesterday. Wilmer Flores has been playing pretty well. Even an outfielder like Michael Conforto. Any of these Mets guys are going to be in play today, and you want to make sure you have some exposure to them. This is going to be a high-scoring game if you base it off the last two games. And remember, with the last two games being so high-scoring, both of these teams have pretty taxed bullpens, meaning that you're going to probably have some guys in there, and even if they're getting lit up and giving up a couple runs, the manager's going to ask them to give them a couple innings and stay in there. So we have another chance today to see a big scoring game come out of Coors Field. And I think you're going to have at least a couple of these guys on your roster, whether it's cash or a tournament roster, in order to really have a chance to make some money today. Next guy we're going to talk about, the Mets. The Mets are going to be throwing a whole bunch of relief pitchers up there. The guy that they had listed as the starter is Logan Barrett. I don't know if he is going to be the starter or not, but I do know that they're skipping Matt Harvey's turn in the rotation. And this is going to be what we like to call a bullpen game. Basically, they're going to have 4 or 5 pitchers that they're going to roll out there for 2 or 3 innings today, and basically just let those guys eat up some innings. And, they already took a couple games in this series. So if they lose this one, I don't think they're going to be too upset about it. They're going to try to patch it together with a whole bunch of relief pitchers. Now, the Mets are pretty right-handed dominant in their bullpen. So with all these relief pitchers stretching out, I think you want to look at a lot of these left-handed bats on the Colorado Rockies. Guys like Carlos Gonzalez with a 416 WOBA, 329 ISO. Nolan Arenado, 389 WOBA, 318 ISO. He's righty on righty, but he does hit right-handed pitching better, so he's somebody else I think you should consider. Charlie Blackmon, 376 WOBA, 187 ISO. He hit a home run yesterday. I think he's got about 15 home runs and 30 stolen bases this year. So fantasy-wise, those are really, really good numbers. A lot of ways that he can get you to the score that you need in order to pay off his salary. A guy like Ben Paulson is somebody who's very interesting to me. 360 WOBA, 115 ISO score. He's probably one of the cheaper options you can get in that Colorado team. He hits in the middle of that order, somewhere in the 5 or 6 hole. And again, any cheap exposure you can get to Coors Field is a good idea today. It's going to help your overall roster and still allow you to get some of the big studs in. Last guy you could look at, I don't know if Nick Hundley's going to be in there catching. This might be a McHenry day. If you do get McHenry, obviously you want to look at any of the speed guys on the Mets because they'll be able to steal some bases off them. If Hundley's in there today, though, I think he's a decent option with his bat as well. Next guy we can talk about, Colin Rea, going up against the St. Louis Cardinals in San Diego. Rea has actually been pretty good. Right-handed bats have a higher average against them this year in the majors and in minor league pitching, but he's been pretty solid since his call-up. The only guy I would really look at on St. Louis, the only guy on St. Louis who really profiles well against right-handed pitching is Matt Carpenter. 376 WOBA, 210 ISO number, should be on top of that order, should get that extra at-bat with them being the away team. So I think that Carpenter's somebody who might be in play. Mike Pelfrey pitching for the Twins up against Baltimore at Baltimore today. 285 to each side of the plate, but his home run numbers this year are pretty low. He hasn't been giving up a lot of long balls. Left-handed bats do have a 1.68 whip against him, so lefties he's been struggling to get them out. A guy like Gerardo Parra is in play there. Since coming over, he's got a 399 WOBA with a 268 ISO score. You can look at a guy like Chris Davis, 371 WOBA, 293 ISO score. He's got a little more power. Again, we said Pelfrey's not giving up a ton of home runs, so I don't know if he really profiles all that well here. He's very expensive too, so I would really rather pay up at other positions for some other studs who profile a little bit better. You got Manny Machado at third base, 386 WOBA, 231 ISO. That's a righty-on-righty matchup. Like we said, Pelfrey's been giving it up to both sides of the plate, so I think even the right-handers are going to be in play today. A guy like Machado, a guy like Adam Jones if you wanted to. But again, those are, the guys that stand out on the numbers. We have Kevin Gausman on the other side of that game. He's allowed right-handed bats to hit for a higher average over the last 2 years, but they don't have a very high home run total against them. The only guy in that Minnesota team I would look to use would be Miguel Sanu. Miguel Sano has a 454 WOBA with a 343 ISO number. He's been absolutely smashing right-handed pitching so far since his call-up. So I think this is a good spot for him, especially in a good ballpark to hit in like Camden Yards. Next guy we can talk about is somebody I think we're definitely going to be targeting against today, and that's Matt Wisler. The rookie from Atlanta has allowed left-handed bats to hit 347 against them with a 1.96 whip and 6 home runs in 28 innings. So the one guy who jumps off the page at you is Kyle Schwarber. 451 WOBA, 326 ISO number. Probably one of the best catching options you're going to have. You're not going to find numbers much better than that at the catching position. So he's definitely going to be in play. He's very expensive, but he does have good upside today, so he might be worth the price tag. You also have Anthony Rizzo, who's been heating up. 391 WOBA, 265 ISO. He's been putting up some big numbers lately, getting a lot of big hits, and is starting to be the monster that we all expected him to be down the stretch, which the Cubs are going to need because they are in a tight playoff race. Next guy we can talk about is Chris Coughlin. Coughlin has a 359 WOBA with a 221 ISO. He's the cheap option that you can put in there from that team. He tends to hit in that 3 spot in between Schwarber and Rizzo lately. Even if he's in the 5 spot in that order, he's still somebody who's going to be hitting towards the top of the order and has a good matchup in this lefty-righty split. Let's see. We got Kendall Graveman pitching for Oakland. Left-handed bats have hit 281 against him. Right-handed bats have actually hit 284 against him as well. So he could be somebody that's in play. But the only guy who really profiles well against right-handed pitching on that Tampa Bay team is catcher John Jaso. Jaso DH'd yesterday, so there's a good chance he's going to be in there today behind the dish. If he's leading off as the road team in Oakland, I think he's somebody else you can look at as a cheap catching option. He's got a 354 WOBA with a 141 ISO score right now. So he's somebody that I think you can put in there as a salary saver if you're coming down from Schwarber and trying to fit in like a Clayton Kershaw as a pitcher, or if you wanted to use some of the big bats that we're going to mention. Let's see. Cincinnati is going up against Arizona. Chase Anderson on the mound for Arizona. He's given up about a 280 batting average to both sides of the plate. The guy on Cincinnati who profiles the best against right-handed pitching is Joey Votto. He's got a 415 WOBA with a 242 ISO number. Him and Rizzo are the 2 most expensive first base options on most sites today. I think I like Rizzo a little more if I'm going to be paying up for him, but I'm not going to argue with anybody who goes with Votto either. I think Votto makes a better tournament play because I think people will gravitate more towards Rizzo if they're spending up at first base. So I think you're going to get low ownership on a really good hitter in a really solid matchup. Next guy we can talk about, Matt Garza. Garza is at Washington against the Nationals. Left-handed bats have hit 291 against him with 10 home runs in 64 innings. And he's actually given up 11 home runs to right-handed bats on the other side too. So I think any of these power hitters are guys that you got to consider. The only guy who really stands out on the numbers is Bryce Harper, and his numbers really stand out. He has a 479 WOBA with a 348 ISO number. So he's been hitting well lately. If you look at his scores on DraftKings, I think 6 of his last 9 games, he's had a double-digit fantasy score. So I think that Bryce Harper is starting to round back into form and is definitely somebody who you should consider in this matchup. Again, he's not cheap anywhere that you play him, but his production is starting to become elite again. And the numbers that he has are just absolutely eye-popping. You're not going to see too many other guys with a combination of WOBA and ISO this late in the season that's anywhere near as good as what he has. We got Ryan Vogelsong pitching for the San Francisco Giants against Pittsburgh today at Pittsburgh. Left-handed bats have been doing better against him with a 260 batting average, 1.49 whip, and 13 home runs in 49 innings. So there aren't too many left-handed bats to target on this Pittsburgh team. You got a guy like Neil Walker as a cheap second base option. Gregory Polanco, who was hot last week, but is starting to cool off a little bit this week. The 2 guys who have the best numbers are actually righty on righty, and that's Andrew McCutcheon with a 385 WOBA and a 222 ISO, and Jung Ho Kang with a 357 WOBA and a 155 ISO. Again, this game's in Pittsburgh, not a great hitter's park. Vogelsong has been lit up a little bit this year. He's been much better at home than he is on the road, but I don't know if I really want to take a lot of these Pittsburgh bats. There's nobody who really makes complete and perfect sense for you to target here. But again, I do think that they will get a couple runs off Vogelsong, so they got to come from somewhere. Next guy is John Danks pitching against Seattle Mariners. Right-handed bats are hitting 300 against Danks with 13 home runs and 100 innings pitched. Nelson Cruz is probably the one guy who stands out the most. Big right-handed bat, has hit left-handed pitching well his entire career, has a 479 WOBA, 389 ISO number. So I think that he's another guy that you want to look at spending up for. It's a really tough call for me between spending up for Cruz and spending up for Harper. Both of these guys are in good matchups today. They have the splits that they want. You know, their WOBAs and their ISO scores, their home runs against that handedness of pitcher. You know, they're all basically the same. They've both been hitting pretty well lately. They've both been putting up good numbers. So it's kind of a matter of personal preference. Obviously, if you can fit both of them in, go ahead and do that. If you are fitting both of them in today, it's pretty much a guarantee you're not using Clayton Kershaw, because I don't know if there's any way you can make that work. But if you think that, you know, one or both of these guys is who you want to roll with, you know, they're both in good spots and you get no arguments with either from me. The other guy I really like on this Seattle team is Franklin Gutierrez. He's been hitting very well lately. He's got a WOBA up at 400 right now with an ISO score of 308. He's hitting fifth in that order. He has big bats in front of him that have been getting on base. Guys like Kyle Seager, guys like Nelson Cruz, guys like Robinson Cano. So if those guys are getting on in front of him and he keeps getting up with guys on base and he keeps making contact and hitting the ball pretty well, he's going to rack up a lot of hits and RBIs in this game. And if you look at his game log, you're going to see that he's been able to put up some big scores. I think over his last 9 games, he's averaged over 10 DraftKings points. And again, you're getting this guy pretty cheap. I know on DraftKings, he's like 33. I think on FanDuel, he's 28 or 29 today. So if you're getting a discounted price on a guy who's hitting in the meat of the order and has been producing, I think it's a good guy that you can roll in there, especially when the splits are in his favor against a guy who struggles against right-handed pitching. Next guy we can talk about, CC Sabathia from my Yankees. Right-handed bats are hitting 325 against him, 22 home runs and 104 innings pitched this year. The problem I have is there's no right-handed bats on Cleveland that I'm really scared of. There's nobody that I really want to target against CC. I mean, I guess you can use some guys like Abraham Almonte, maybe even a Carlos Santana, some of these switch hitters that'll be hitting from the right side. But the numbers that these guys have from the right side is nothing compared to the numbers that they have when they're facing a right-handed pitcher from the left side. The other problem that I have is, you know, right-handed bats don't play as well in Yankee Stadium as they do in other places. You usually want to look at lefties in Yankee Stadium. There's actually a lot of things that are stacking up that make me believe that CC Sabathia might be a sneaky start here today. I'd be interested to see what Josh has to say about him in his pitching video. So make sure you get over to the RotoCurve site and check out Josh's pitching video as well, because he always has some really good insight and keeps you away from some of the bad plays today. So I'd be interested to see what he thinks of CC today. Next guy we could talk about, Aaron Nola. Left-handed bats have a 308 average in limited innings pitched against him. That means that a guy like Derek Dietrich is probably the guy I like the best. Remember, this Miami-Philly game is in Miami, so it's not the greatest hitter's ballpark. But Dietrich's a guy with a 410 WOBA and a 287 ISO score. If you look at his scores on FanDuel, he's got 5.5 points or better in 4 of his last 6 games. So if you have a guy that's going to be producing like that at a price of only $3,100 on DraftKings, I think he's on FanDuel, I think he's only $3,300 on DraftKings. So if you can get a guy that can get you double-digit points on DraftKings or 5 or 6 points on FanDuel, and you can get him at a price that low, you're getting great value for using somebody like him. Again, on a day like today where there's some big bats that you want in your lineup, or a guy like Kershaw that you might want on the mound, you're going to need to come down and take some of these cheaper options. You know, guys like the Andres Blanco, who we mentioned, the guy like a Derek Dietrich. This is the way that you can build your lineup in order to get some of those big bats or big pitchers into your lineup today. Let's see. We got, you know, other guys in that game. I mean, you can look at like a guy like Ichiro, who's been batting in the 2-hole. D. Gordon, who's been leading off, although he's kind of expensive. Justin Bour is another guy who's been in the middle of that order, although he hasn't hit as well as he did when he was on that home run barrage when he first came up. All those left-handed bats are probably in play. But again, it's a bad ballpark, so I wouldn't look to like stack them up. But I do think that a couple of those guys could have good games today. Let's see. We got R.A. Dickey pitching for Toronto against the Los Angeles Angels. Looking at the numbers, guys like Cole Calhoun, guys like Pujols, guys like Joyce, guys like Giavotella, none of those guys have good BVP numbers against R.A. Dickey. When you're looking at a knuckleballer like Dickey, BVP is an important thing because not everybody is able to hit the knuckleball, so you want to find the guys who can. The one guy who does stand out a little bit is Mike Trout. He's 3 for 8 lifetime against Dickey with 2 walks, so he has an on-base percentage of 500. He's about the only guy that I would look to roll out there against Dickey. Now, Dickey hasn't been bad lately. He's a very middle-of-the-road pitcher. He doesn't really get lit up, and he also doesn't really shut anybody down. But again, the only guy who stands out BVP-wise is Mike Trout. So Trout is probably the only guy that I would even consider rolling out here today against a pitcher like Dickey. Next guy. Now we're going to start getting into some of the better pitchers. Some of them have good matchups. Some of them don't. Some of them have some things that concern me. And one of the guys who has some stuff that concerns me is Trevor Bauer. Bauer has a really low batting average. But going up against this Yankee team, he's allowed 23 home runs in 143 innings pitched. Now, the Yankees are a big home run hitting team. They have a low average, but they do hit a lot of home runs. So I would expect a couple home runs to come out of this game. The Yankees don't really have anybody on their team with over a 350 WOBA against right-handed pitching, though. So I don't really know, without Teixeira in there, who the guys that you really want to target are. I mean, you have left-handed bats like Ellsbury and Gardner up on top of that order. You have the rookie Chris Bird, who's probably going to be in there playing first base today. You got a guy like Beltran who can hit from the right or left side. Beltran is probably my favorite option on this team today. But again, he's not somebody that I really absolutely love. Even a Brian McCann, who's been hitting a little bit better and picking up his power numbers. None of these guys have great stats to go up against Bauer. On the flip side, though, in Bauer's last two starts, he's thrown up negative numbers. So he's been getting lit up lately and hasn't been the pitcher that he was earlier in the season. This is a game that I like to say it's either a stack it or a stay away. If you're playing in a tournament, definitely wouldn't do anything with this game in a cash game. But if you're playing in a tournament, you're either stacking up Yankee bats thinking that this is another game that Bauer's going to get lit up, or you're completely staying away and maybe even using a guy like Bauer thinking that, well, his matchup is so good that this is the game he's going to wind up turning everything around. I think you go to one extreme or the other with this game. You either use all the Yankee bats and not use Bauer, or you use Bauer and you don't use any of the Yankee bats. But again, it's a high volatility kind of play that I would only look to use in maybe a tournament. Next guy we can talk about, Eduardo Rodriguez. The rookie's been very solid for the Boston Red Sox. He is a left-handed pitcher. Left-handers actually do have a little bit of a higher batting average against them, but right-handers have the higher whip. He's been struggling more to get out the right-handed batters. The two guys who profiled the best against left-handed pitching on that Kansas City team, you got Lorenzo Cain with a 420 WOBA and a 231 ISO score. So he's probably the best option that you can look at here. The other guy, since coming over from the trade, Ben Zobrist has a 500 WOBA with a 346 ISO number against left-handed pitching. So as much as I like Zobrist, I usually like him better against right-handed pitching from the left side. But, I mean, the guy's been as hot as anybody else. He's batting in the two-hole. He should be in front of Kane. So if you put that duo in your lineup, I think you're going to get a little bit of production out of them. But, again, Eduardo Rodriguez has been pretty good, and he's been pretty tough at home as well. So I don't think this is a game that I really want to target against in cash. But I do think that some of these guys make some sense and have a little bit of merit if you want to use them in the tournament. Let's see. Raciel Iglesias is the next pitcher we have. He pitches for Cincinnati going up against Arizona today. He's been tough on right-handed bats, only allowed a 172 batting average to him. But left-handed bats are hitting over 309 against him so far this year. That means that the guy who profiles the best on that Arizona team is probably David Peralta. Peralta hasn't been hitting as well lately, but he does still have a 386 WOBA with a 238 ISO number. His price has dropped on most of the sites, so he's back to being a reasonable middle-tier option. And I think he's another guy that you're going to have to take a look at if you're trying to fit in some of these studs. Also, maybe an Ender Inciarte, leadoff man on top of that order. He's the other left-handed bat that they have there that should profile well against Iglesias. And I think Iglesias is a guy who you can steal a couple bases off of too. So if Inciarte can get on, I think he's somebody you got to look at. You got guys like Goldie and Wellington Castillo. Both of them have pretty good, numbers in righty-on-righty matchups. But again, Iglesias has only allowed a 172 batting average to right-handed batters. So he is pretty tough on same-handed hitters. So I don't think this is the best matchup. Although if you look at Goldie, I mean, he was 4 for 5 yesterday with a couple home runs. So, he's starting to see the ball and hit the ball pretty well. And when he's on fire, I mean, he's one of the best hitters in the game that we have. He had a little bit of a slump, but it looks like he's broken out of it in a big way. So if he can keep that rolling like he did yesterday, he could be somebody who, basically can win you some head-to-heads all by himself. Next guy to talk about, Edinson Volquez. Volquez has allowed right-handed bats to hit 254 and left-handed bats to hit 218. Going up against Boston and Fenway Park, he's not a guy I really want to target much against. He's been pretty good this year. Maybe a guy like David Ortiz makes a little bit of sense to use against them. Alejandro De Aza has some pretty good numbers, but Again, 218 against left-handed bats. You would think that left-handed bats would do better against him, but so far that they haven't. So I don't think I'm going to be taking a lot of bats against Volquez. You have Lance McCullers back pitching for the Houston Astros today, going up against Clayton Kershaw. He was a stud earlier in the year, but in his last start, he basically only went about 1 inning and got lit up, and then we haven't seen him in 3 weeks. So I'm not really sure what to expect out of him today. Left-handed bats have only hit 211 against him. Right-handed bats have hit 240 against them. So, I like I said, I really don't know what to consider. The Dodgers team was shut down yesterday by Scott Kazmir, who pitched a really good game against them. Again, if you think that McCullers is going to be the guy he was before that injury where we hadn't seen him in 3 weeks. I mean, he was lights out. He was beating good teams, and he was doing it with a decent number of strikeouts and really limiting the other team's, production. If you don't think that he's back to 100% and the man that he was then obviously, if it's based on his last start where he gave up 7 or 8 hits in the first inning and didn't even get out of the first inning, then I think you can definitely target against him and put some bats in there. But there's nothing basically on the numbers that's pointing me in one direction or the other. It's more of a gut feel. If you think that he's going to be good to go, by all means, stay away. If you think that he's going to get lit up, then I think you could put a bunch of these bats in there. Makes more sense to do something like this in a tournament for me because I think that the Dodgers bats are going to be low owned, and Houston's a pretty good hitter's ballpark. So if McCullers is off his game, I think that they could get a lot of runs. But again, if he's back to the way he was before that injury, I think he's going to be low owned as well, and I think that he could put up a decent number if that's the case. Next guy we want to talk about, Taijuan Walker. 255 batting average to both sides of the plate. He has given up 21 home runs in 140 innings, so it is something that is a little bit of an issue for him. Not really targeting anybody on this White Sox team today. Walker's been pretty good at home. The White Sox haven't hit very well lately, so there's nothing that really stands out to me. If you want to go righty on righty and go with a guy like Jose Abreu, maybe. Left-handed bat on top of the order like Adam Eaton might have a little bit of merit. But Seattle's not a very good hitter's ballpark. Like I said, Walker's been good at home, so I don't think that there's a lot of guys that are really jumping off the page, guys that I want to target here. Next guy we can look at is Jason Hammel. Hammel's been very good lately. Versus Atlanta, Atlanta's offense has been very bad. So you take a pitcher like Hammel, who's been solid, and offense like Atlanta, who's been pretty bad, and I think Hammel's in a pretty good spot today. Nobody on that Atlanta team is sticking out to me. There's nobody I really want to use. But I do think I might have some Hammel shares in a couple of the tournaments today as well. Let's see. We got Jordan Zimmerman. Zimmerman is going up against the Milwaukee Brewers. Left-handed bats hitting 289 against him this year with 9 homers and 72 innings pitched. I think a guy like Adam Lind, probably the one guy who stands out based on the numbers. 388 WOBA for him, 210 ISO score. So he's probably the guy who's most in play if you're going to use anybody here. But again, Washington's not a good hitter's park. Zimmerman's been a pretty good pitcher throughout his career. Not really a lot of guys that I want to stack up in this game as well. You got Garrett Richards going up against Toronto. This one's a little bit tough to figure. That Toronto offense is very, very good, and they have been pounding hits out. But they usually pound out left-handed pitching a lot more than they pound out right-handed pitching. And Garrett Richards is a pretty solid pitcher. He'll make a mistake every now and then, but he still winds up getting at least a pretty decent game out of every start when he toes the rubber. So I'm not thinking that Richards is going to shut down this Toronto offense. I don't think he would be a pitcher that I target, but I also don't think there's a lot of guys who I want to use against him on this Toronto team. You do have a couple guys that stand out on the numbers, Joey Bautista, Josh Donaldson. These guys are just very, very good, solid professional hitters. Even in righty-on-righty matchups, they can still do some damage, but it's a big park downgrade for them going to Los Angeles for this game. And like I said, I don't know. I don't have any certainty one way or another. And for cash games, we like some certainty. So I don't think I'm going to be using many bats on either side, many bats or pitchers on either side of this game. You got Jake Odorizzi going up against Oakland. Oakland's offense has struggled. My only problem with Odorizzi is he hasn't been pitching deep into the game. So you are going to get into that Tampa Bay bullpen, which has, not been all that great lately either. I do think Odorizzi should be in line for a pretty good start, and I don't want to use any of the Oakland bats the way they've been playing. You got Liriano going up against San Francisco. San Francisco is surprisingly bad against left-handed pitching. They don't have a lot of guys who really stand out, which was a little bit, confusing to me because they do have a lot of right-handed bats. You would figure some of those right-handed bats would be pretty good against left-handed pitching, but this year the numbers just haven't proven that out overall. So Liriano's at home in Pittsburgh. He's been, great at home this year. He's a really good pitcher. So I think Liriano's in a pretty good spot today, and I'm not really looking to use many guys in that San Francisco Giants team, if anybody at all. Let's see. We got Cole Hamels going up against Detroit. Maybe Miguel Cabrera against Hamels, considering that he's a left-handed pitcher. But again, Hamels is a pretty good pitcher. Don't really want to target too many bats in this Detroit team at all against them. You can look at guys like a James McCann or a Jose Iglesias if you need some cheap salary savers to throw in there. But again, I mean, there's much better pitchers to target against here today than Cole Hamels. You got Michael Wacha against San Diego. I think Wacha is one of the better pitchers on the mound, one of the better options we have today. His price is pretty reasonable on most of the sites. I really like his price over on FanDuel. I think I have him in my lineup over there right now. He's somebody who, again, not looking to take any bats against him. The only bat righty on righty for San Diego that profiles well is Justin Upton. And, I'm not looking to take Upton in this matchup with Wacha. And the last pitcher on the mound is Clayton Kershaw. And I don't take bats against Clayton Kershaw, so I'll make that real easy. I know he's going up against Houston. I know Houston hits left-handed pitching pretty well, but they haven't seen too many left-handed pitchers like Clayton Kershaw. Houston is a good hitter's ballpark, yada, yada, yada. It's still Clayton Kershaw, and I'm not taking anybody on Houston against him today. So that pretty much wraps it up for our Benny's Bat section. Tried to go through all the pitchers. That was all the pitchers that are on the mound today. Tried to give you their weaknesses and which guys on the other team you can look for. Remember, you still got to wait till lineups come out. See if you can find some of those cheap salary-saving options, especially on a day like today, because you do want to try to get a guy like Kershaw into your lineup. You also want to try to get some of these big bats like the Nelson Cruzes and the Bryce Harpers, the Mike Trouts. If you want to get these guys into your lineup, you're going to need to find some salary savers. Guys like Blanco and Dietrich, John Jaso, these are all good guys to use as salary savers. But remember, when the lineups come out, you're going to find, especially on a Sunday, you're going to find some guys who are off. You're going to find some guys batting up higher in the order. So try to find some guys up in the order that do have, good numbers against the handedness of pitcher that they're going to see. Make sure they're in good ballparks that they, should be able to get a couple hits in. And put a combination of those guys together with the guys who have the best numbers, and you should find yourself the winning combination in your 50-50s, your head-to-heads, and hopefully even in some of your tournaments. So thank you guys for joining us today for this section of Benny's Bats. Remember, you can follow us on Twitter at RotoCurve or follow me at BennyR11. Make sure you get over to the RotoCurve site and sign up for an account. Start earning some curve points that you can trade in for tickets to ball games, money to spend on some of these fantasy sites, even some really nice RotoCurve swag like I've been wearing all week long when I was down at the beach. So thank you guys for joining us. And as always, stay classy, DFS.